Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast, episode number 196 of the show. I'm Ramon Mejia, and I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. And this week I have 10 new reviews for you folks at home. That includes 5 from me and 5 from our news contributor, Ian Mitchell, in Ian's reviews, Ian's recommendation section. The 5 that are coming from me are going to be Greenways Goblins, Resurrection Quest, book number 1. After that, it'll be 7 Worlds, volume number 1. Then it'll be Myriad Stars, Humanity's Potential, 12 Evolutions, book number 1. Then it's going to be GalaxSec, a sci-fi LitRPG series, Skeletons in Space, book number 2. And then it'll be Melee, a LitRPG adventure. And then we're going to have 5 reviews from Ian's picks of the week. So there we go. But before we're going to get into any of that, we're going to go into, of course, LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we have one story. That's it. One. Not a busy week. Panic Jump Books has an interview with one of their authors, Alexei Osachuk. The interview is about his latest LitRPG series called Underdog. I actually enjoyed Underdog book 1 quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to seeing book 2 come out pretty soon. Okay, on to stuff that's out now. This stuff that came out this past week, haven't had a chance to read it. That includes Dungeon Dive, a LitRPG short story, Tales of the God Games book. Also out now is Second Story Man, game LitRPG adventure, The Bad Guys, book number 2 from Eric Ugland. Also out is Universe, ICS, Keymaster, book number 2. And now on to new audiobooks. That was a short list. New audiobooks in LitRPG, including Hunter's Dream Online. The Dungeon Eternium, Divine Dungeon, book number 5 is out as an audiobook now. Definitely go check that out. I enjoyed the ebook immensely. And the 3rd book in the Bushido Online series. For those of you who enjoyed that particular series, the audiobook is out now. Okay, on to upcoming LitRPG. This is where I read a bunch of stuff that I know is coming out in the near future. And of course, LitRPG authors, if you have something coming out and you want us to add to the list, please email that information to us at feedback@geekbuzz.com. Okay, October the 18th, it'll be Rift Roll Online, book number 2. On the 21st of October, it'll be Dead Man's Retinue, the 3rd book in the NPC series. On the 22nd, it'll be Sword Guardian, Forbidden Magic, book number 1. The 5th book, in Reality Vendors book series, it'll be A Jump into the Unknown, out on October 23rd. Then on October 25th, it'll be Mythian. October the 29th, Silver Peak, which is the 2nd book in the Skyrealms Online series. October 30th, Limitless Lands, book number 4, will be out. On October 31st as well, it'll be Varnoth, the Black Blade, book 2. On November the 1st, it's going to be Awaken Online, Ember, Tarot number 1. So I think it's a side series. I don't think it's the main series there. But we'll have to wait and see. Then it'll be November the 1st. It'll be also A Dark Path, Grimdark, LitRPG. The 2nd book in the Ether Collapse series, Excise, a post-apocalyptic LitRPG, will be out November the 1st, 2019. So on November the 4th, The Way of Deception, World of Karg, book number 2. On November the 7th, Avatar of Light, Interworld Network, book number 2. November the 11th, The Last Time Loop, book number 1 in that series. November the 22nd, it'll be Dragonheart, book number 3, Bloodwell. December the 9th, it'll be the 2nd book in the Knockout series called Level Up Update. December the 13th, it'll be the 3rd book in the Hero Online series. December the 14th, it'll be The Bear Hunt, a 7th book in the Good Guy series. December 23rd, it'll be The Waste, which is Underdog, book number 2. So just mention that. And on to new releases and reviews. And up first this week is going to be Greenways Goblins, Resurrection Quest, book number 1, written by Daniel Schienhofen. It is 392 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Gamers everywhere share a hidden desire deep in their hearts, that their mundane, humdrum world be replaced by ones they play in. When freakish storms envelop the earth, people start disappearing without a trace. Wild theories abound. Is it aliens, spontaneous combustion, or perhaps quantum entanglement? The only ones who might know are those who have vanished. The only ones who might know are the ones who have vanished. An average group of gamers is setting up to start a new campaign. The storm rages across the world, but they only care about the game they're about to start. Little do they know that they would be next to disappear from the face of the earth. Shifted to a different world, the group of friends find the gamer's dream they had always harbored has come true, but not in the way they had hoped. They are not there as themselves, but as the level 1 characters they had been preparing to play. Standing on a road with the smoke rising in the distance, they would soon be given their first quest, but not the one they would have chosen. And there's a warning saying the series contains dark themes, including but not limited to suicide, torture, slavery, and worse. So there you go. Full disclosure, I received advanced copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. Okay. This is a much more comedy-heavy novel than the author's other series. The novel stows good dialogue and banter that the author is known for. There is no sex or even romance in this particular series so far. And it's a very much an action-adventure-oriented kind of story. So that's going to be a departure from the author in some respects. And that'll be very pleasant for some people and some readers. I'd say that the story leans a little more towards fantasy portal fiction, but it still manages to bring the tabletop RPG stuff through, even though there are no notifications and there's no character sheets that you see until like the very, very end. Like after the novel, like the author shows character sheets, but that's not actually part of the story. It's more like, what are they called? Appendixes or something. Instead, the author actually uses the characters to bring out the RPG mechanics and the stuff, the game mechanic stuff. The characters talk about their class powers, their spells, and the game mechanics they recall from when they made their characters. So things like when everybody rejuvenates health, because there's no like actual magical healing here. When does that occur? And they test it out, and how do their powers work, and how often can they use them per day or per hour, or how long it takes to recharge, that kind of stuff. That's all things that they're essentially remembering in the story, and that's how the author's bringing them to the reader. But it doesn't stop there. There are regular references to the story of their powers being used by name. So when like some character has a super duper punch power or something, it'll use the correct name of it as it's been described by the character earlier in the story. So there's definitely mechanics. They're just a little more not front and center, but they are shown on a regular basis in the story. The story is dark, though, in a few places with several characters not even surviving the very first book. I was initially personally just kind of put off by the large cast of characters from the very beginning of the story. There are 7 main characters in the novel, and I was like, oh, that's a lot of people for my very limited brain power to kind of remember and keep track of. And it was very, like I said, is definitely off-putting. Then the story doesn't really spend a ton of time in the very beginning of the novel, giving you time to get to know the characters necessarily before throwing them into like the RPG, tabletop RPG world. But by about the 15-ish% mark, the 7 main characters are broken up into 3 distinct groups. And that actually made it easier for me to get to know the characters, just because those 3 different groups went off and did different things separate from each other. And they would have conversations that would kind of tie the different characters together. But before that, I genuinely was confused about who everybody was, what their relationships were, what their personalities were. And that's just because of how quickly the story dropped these characters into this world who suddenly look different than the characters as they were described in the real world. So it just made it, I actually ended up having to like write names and who they turned into as far as like their tabletop characters and their relationships and everything. So I had to actually take notes. I'm like, that's not great as far as like saying that these connected to me otherwise. But again, after the 15% mark, it got much easier just because the character groupings got smaller and more manageable. And as the story goes on, you get more backstory, you get more opportunities to see who each character is. And so it's easier to remember them. I was after that 15% mark, I enjoyed it a lot more. And so if you're finding yourself struggling in that initial section of this novel, I'd say just kind of push through it and keep going, because the story does get easier to manage as it goes on, and things get much better for me, at least. There are also like some very fun references in the story for LitRPG authors, like Shinofen kind of name drops a ton of people who in the community and authors who he's friends with, and I thought it was kind of cute. It's one of the little like funny little things. Though I don't personally appreciate the terrible, terrible things that the author did to Fubble, in this story. Overall, though, it was entertaining. It's a little more slice of life in that there are goals to the characters, but there's not like major, like, oh, it's time to save the world kind of thing. There are series goals for the story, and there were definitely like quest goals. I don't want to like spoil things, but they're definitely quest goals that the characters want to do before they move on. But it feels a little more slice of life in that the author's establishing the world, what the rules are, how it's different from the tabletop experience they were expecting. But for me, like I said, it was a very action-oriented, lots of action, lots of good fighting. Like I said, gets a little dark occasionally. And if you're into that kind of stuff, I think you'll enjoy this. I did. I found it very entertaining. Gets a score of 7.6 out of 10 for me. That's Greenways Goblins Resurrection Quest with a score of 7.6 out of 10. And next up is going to be Seven Worlds, Volume Number 1, a LitRPG Wuxia short story, written by Daniel Dragon. It is 35 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. Timothy never anticipated that he'd join an organization that would take his memory and send him from world to world. However, that is what he did, and now is starting in another village in another world underneath the land above. A mysterious organization is in control of his life, but that won't stop him from fraternizing with locals and learning about the mysterious traditions, skills, and the men and women that make up their world. For a brief sum of money, almost any village under the organization's altars are able to call him down to their planet and make him do missions under the rules of the organization. In exchange, he tries his hardest to level up and reach level 30, which will allow him to remember all the worlds he's gone to before and start on his journey of the legendary Seven Worlds. His only wish is to move forward as fast as possible towards his goal, even if it means slighting those who try and fight against him and killing them without mercy or regard for their families. And this is a short story. It's honestly, I feel like that description was long on the story. 35 pages. The RPG stuff is definitely there regularly. It is LitRPG. It's a part of the story with a whole system in place to convert experience points to currency in a larger transfer system mixed in with a summoning system. There's a whole well thought out thing here. Yet I couldn't quite enjoy it. And most of that is the issue at the beginning of the novel. The beginning of the story it's so awkward, and there's so many elements that are forced with antagonists and the main character, and it's so confusing. I was like, what's happening here? You're kind of just throwing names at me, and they're doing things, and I'm not getting a lot of description of like what's happening or why it's here. And eventually it kind of gets explained out. And there is action, and there's questioning, all that stuff, and it's okay. I think I like the last 10% the most, where it kind of seemed to come together, and it was even like pretty decently written. But overall, it just didn't really work for me. It gets a score of 6 out of 10. As a short story, I know it's challenging to kind of put a coherent story together in 35 pages, but this one just didn't quite make it. So for me, again, that's Seven Worlds, Volume 1. A LitRPG Wuxia short story with the score 6 out of 10. And next is going to be Myriad Stars, Humanity's Potential 12 Evolutions, Book Number 1, a LitRPG universe, written by M.Q. Kajak. It is 138 pages, $2.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Humanity barely managed to survive the greatest catastrophe in the species' short history. But from the ruins of civilization, humanity creates new technologies and unlocks hidden, latent potential within themselves, and through the sacrifices of heroes from around the globe, somehow manages to survive. But dangers lurk within the depths of the ocean, growing stronger. Humanity is caught a moment of reprieve, but must continue to evolve in order to stay alive. Mu Feng, born mute and weak to a retired battle specialist, may just be the least likely candidate to become the next savior of humanity. Enjoy this Wuxia cultivation novel. Myriad Stars is the universe filled with cultivators and a great deal of LitRPG and gameless stuff. So that's the author's description. There are RPG elements to the story. Status screens the main character sees when he increases his stats, and combat art description. That's kind of it. I'd say this is maybe light LitRPG. Not even really gamelit. There's no like really other game elements here. It's just the main character has an interface where he sees his stats increases and some abilities and descriptions for those. It leans much more heavily towards the cultivation or Wuxia side of things, with the main character training, taking special foods to increase his power, and doing quests and such. Though he's blessed with a special potential that let him grow stronger than everyone else, the story itself is very slice of life. The main character fighting monsters, training, dungeon diving, dealing with family rivals, rescuing a girl, all that kind of stuff. It's a decent story. It wasn't boring for me, but it just, I don't know. I didn't really work for, like, the story itself was kind of predictable. I liked a few of the progression mechanics, especially like the nightmare sword art training. I thought that was kind of like, that element. But on the whole, it just didn't appeal to me. I'm not sure if it's the cultivation Wuxia elements, maybe. But like the storyline itself was like, oh, the main character's family is suddenly thrown down because of like the rivals that hate his family, and he has to do some special missions to get strong enough to oppose them and to bring them down, and that it kind of repeats itself at nauseam a little bit. This one, it just wasn't an appealing kind of plot line for me. The dungeon genre was okay. Like I said, some of the progression mechanics were actually like, oh, that was kind of neat, but overall it just didn't really work for me. Gets a score 6 out of 10. That's Myriad Stars, Humanity's Potential, 12 Evolutions, book number 1, a LitRPG universe with a score 6 out of 10. You might like it more if you are more into the Wuxia stuff. And next we have GalaxSec, a sci-fi LitRPG, Skeletons in Space, book number 2, written by Andres Lowe's. I'm probably saying that wrong, and I've met this guy. Still, it is 338 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here is the author's description. A magical skeleton, an office lady, and a corporate mercenary team walk into a his-staff-infected planet. If only there was a joke in there somewhere. Douglas crash lands on the planet Ivangi Prime and proceeds to do what he does best, repetitive chaos. He tries to set a plastic table on fire and makes a few pretty pink mushroom clouds, but luckily the planet is long dead, and its current inhabitants are incapable of lodging complaints. He then finds a new friend in a familiar body who helps him make sense of the strange world while getting used as a test dummy for new spells. Finnick, a kidnapped street rat, gets caught up in this particular mess when her mercenary team is sent to investigate a rumored death, namely that of a super corporation owner, Solon. Yet before the scouting expedition can truly get started, they stumble across ghosts from the past and a planet-spanning bioweapon that is much more awake than expected. Join Douglas on his quest for monotonous tasks, junk food, and maybe becoming a space cop. Okay, there you go. This is an interesting story. I had a good time with it. Douglas in the story has left the space station from book 1. He's stranded on it, is now on a new planet. He has to learn the rules to survive, and put himself back together multiple times. And that's kind of the core of the story. The story has still all of the magical manipulation and RPG progression that I enjoyed from book 1. But it starts with I would say the story starts better than book 1. Book 1 had kind of a slow start because they had to explain the universe, how the main character gets his RPG powers, and that system there. So that's the book 1 had a much slower, and this one has a much better, I think, faster pace beginning because it doesn't have to do the exploration. Instead, it kind of gets right into the stuff I enjoyed about the series, book 1, I should say, which is the slice of life adventure, the good humor, the kind of dry sense of humor joke sometimes, and the magical experimentation and progression. And those are the things I liked about the story. And this has those in space. So I had a good time with it. It gets a better score than book 1. Gets a score of 7.5 out of 10. That's GalaxSec, a sci-fi LitRPG series. Skeletons in Space, book number 2, with a score of, again, 7.5 out of 10. Next, we have Melee, a LitRPG adventure, book number 1, written by Wyatt Savage. It is 350 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here is the author's description. What was once virtual is now reality. Trapped in the middle of an alien invasion, Logan James, a down-on-his-luck dollar store cashier, discovers there's only one way out. Compete in an alien-imposed game, a global battle royale called The Melee. Forced to fight with his best friend Dwayne and a cute cashier named Alicia, he finds that the rules are simple. Battle against the other participants and an army of the galaxy's worst monsters and villains, level up, amass experience points and loots, and use any means necessary to reach the center of the Earth in 19 days. Hundreds of people will live, hundreds of millions will die. So there we go. Honestly, story's kind of meh. It wasn't that great for me. Even though the setup story is something I've read before, like an alien imposed game system. I was hoping for something better than what actually turned out to be. Like the novel description is actually decently written. The story itself is not as engaging initially. The whole alien invasion thing is actually announced at the 4% mark. They're initially a kill game, right? And yet with the exception, like one good action scene, you kind of have to suffer through the first like 30-ish% of this novel, like first 31%, where there's essentially a bunch of background information given, character development stuff, for a bunch of people that I don't care about. And I never really did. And I never really even cared about the main character. So I get that what the author is trying to do in like creating this emotional bond with these characters by giving them backstory, these events, so that when they die, there's supposed to be an emotional impact, or creating tension with people preparing for the bad that may come. However, it didn't really work for me. Like I said, I never really cared about the main character, much less the randomly named and killed people in the story. And all the talk about like preparing was intense. It was just kind of tedious for me. And that's kind of the overall impression of the book that I had. Once the actual like dead kill game starts in the about 31% mark, the action is good. The action in the story is well written, nicely described fights and battles and everything. The main character is definitely overpowered, but that's just calling everything. It doesn't make like RPG sense, but it's a thing in the story. Still, the RPG actual stuff is pretty decent after the 31% mark. Again, you actually get descriptions of monsters, of levels, HPs, weaknesses, powers, strengths, XP from killing players. They can be used to purchase upgrades and levels. All this stuff is there. You're not really seeing much of it in the first third of the story. So it again, that's part of the reason I didn't like that first third in the first place. I would definitely say the story leans more towards game lit than LitRPG. Again, there are RPG elements here, but the story itself feels more like a multiplayer shooter than an RPG game inspired system. Even the author himself, like in the other like pre-orders for the series, says, "Oh, it's inspired by these other like multiplayer games or these battle royale games," and none of those are really RPG games. So they just have RPG elements for like progression systems, which is perfectly fine. Just be aware of what you're getting into. With the exception, again, that one fight scene in the first 30%, that part was just boring for me. That's it. And again, overall, good fights, but that's kind of it. The rest of it wasn't really interesting. Like anything between those fights, just wasn't entertaining for me. And so for me, just in a look overall, again, there are some nice fights here. And if you like battle royale games, I think you might like this more than I did. So for me, it gets score 6 out of 10. That's Melee, a LitRPG adventure, book 1 with a score of 6 out of 10. And next up is Ian's Picks of the Week. It's our new segment where we got a new contributor, Ian Mitchell, who is nice enough to write some reviews for us for the stuff that I'm not reading. So here it goes. We're going to start off with, there's a picture of Ian, whose name I'm saying correctly now, I hope. And we're going to start off with his first review for Earth Force 2, Relict, written by Shimmer Kuznets. He describes it as LitRPG in space. Definitely feels like an episodic TV series. This time we have a few battles, gain some new crews, redecorate the ship, do some shopping, and make it a bit safer along the way. Stay tuned for the next episode. I like the characters and the way the world building is handled, some nice banter, and a few good challenges for the crew. A great continuation and a great reading. No cute mascot yet. He gives it a 8.6 out of 10. Personally, I enjoyed book number 1. I haven't had a chance to read book number 2, which is why I'm really happy that Ian is here in the team, because he gets to read the stuff that I just sometimes can't get a chance to. And I don't know that when I will, but now we at least get a review for this, for a book series that I've enjoyed personally, and he's giving it an 8.6 out of 10. Next up is Dungeon World 3, a Dungeon Core experience, written by Jonathan Brooks. Ian gives it a 7.8 out of 10, and he says, "I love the series and the characters. Battles were entertaining. Book 3 spent more time trekking across country than I like. I missed the dialogue between the dungeon cores that was in book 2. Overall, book 3 was pretty good reading." So there we go. And his next review after that is Dungeon Lord, Ancient Traditions, The Wrath's Haunt, a LitRPG series, book number 4. Personally, I've enjoyed books number 3. I just hadn't had a chance to read book number 4, which is again where Ian comes in. He gave it a 9.0 out of 10, which is high praise. He says, it's tough being a dungeon lord. Dungeons to staff, trap research to oversee, governments to overthrow, dungeon lord event to attend. And then there's the race for the Nightmare Factory. I had a wonderful time. I had about 3 books worth of enjoyment reading book number 4. Intense and satisfying battles and conflicts. For comparison, the Wild West movie comes to mind. It was fun, moderate body count. I'm not sure if the Wild Wild West movie is the best comparison. That didn't do great in theaters, but hey, if you like it, there you go. For me, I actually like the series a lot. And I'm glad that I enjoyed it as well. Okay, next is Jade Wolf Awakening by Eden Blue. Second step cousin from the same mother, I think, for Eden Red. This is actually the first kind of gameless story from Eden Red. That's safe for work. That's why she's using a different name, Eden Blue, because it is safe for work stuff. Ian gave it a score of 8.0 out of 10. And here's what he said about it. He said, I like Eden's new Cultivating Gamelet book. It is a different take on things that expands the genre. Quite a bit of this first story is on the road with an increasing party of travelers. I found the part at the end when we get to find out more about why this trip was so difficult. It's the first safer work story with a young adult feel to it. Score 8 out of 10. So there we go. That's Jade's Wolf Awakening with a score of 8 out of 10. Okay, next after that is, that's not the one. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I gotta scroll down for a second. There we go. Somnia Online, book number 5, Distortion. I give it a 8.3 out of 10. He gave that one. I actually like the series up until I think it was it book 3? Kind of fell off a little bit for me, but Ian has been keeping up with it the entire time. He's on book 5 and is giving the review for that one, Distortion. He says, Distortion was very immersive for me. It flowed well and was really hard to put down for the little things like eating. The intensity and feeling of danger really comes out. If the guild didn't goof around, it would be too grim. The various combats bring back memories of time spent in MMO dungeons. Great reading. You can do it, Ren. Save the game, save your friend, save yourself. This is a great series. Don't miss it. So Ian has really enjoyed the book 5 in the series. Okay, and let's see. The last review from Ian is Guardian Craft Iron Ages Demons, book number 2, written by Eden Red. Okay, he says it gets a score of 8.4 out of 10. He says, an excellent follow-up book for book 1, some well-described fights. We can get to see a little bit more of the world, a pretty rich one, crafting tables and creepers. Oh my. So it's a short review. I do also want to mention that the novel description for the author does say this story is from adults, 18 plus only. I'm not sure if that means that there's adult content in there. I'm assuming there is, though. Eden Red is known for mixing adult, sometimes some sexy time situations with LitRPG. So that's probably why there's a distinguishing name series between Eden Red and Eden Blue. So there you go. And that's it, everybody. Thank you very much for hanging out with me and watching today. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, YouTube, Patreon, our webpage. Just look for LitRPG Podcast. Whether it's anywhere you go, you're going to find us there somewhere. We also have a bunch of links to other great Facebook groups where you can hang out with your favorite LitRPG authors and see the things they're doing, get announcements for books, and see our podcast, of course. That includes LitRPG Books, the LitRPG Society, Fantasy Nation, and of course, Spoiled Rotten Readers. And of course, if you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. Thanks, everybody. I'm super tired, but I always love doing the podcast because it gives me a chance to talk about something I love, which is LitRPG, with you folks at home. So thank you very much for listening or watching the show every single week. You guys make it... you make this thing possible. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me. And until we can hang out again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.